It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon. I'm Larry Alford. I'm the University Chief Librarian at the University of Toronto. And it's an enormous pleasure to welcome all of you to the University of Toronto Libraries and to the Cheng Tung East Asian Library for this milestone event, the 10th anniversary of the Taiwan Resource Centre for Chinese Studies here at the U of T libraries and here in the East Asian libraries. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the home, the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. And I would add to the traditional U of T land acknowledgement that I have the honor and privilege of living in a condo that overlooks one of the beautiful ravines, at least looking down on them in Toronto. When you walk into those ravines, which were in fact the meeting place and land cared for by the Indigenous peoples who lived here in Toronto, you can see how damaged they are. And I think that we need, as a community, to work with the Indigenous owners of this land to actually try to restore these places to how they were when they took care of them many, many centuries ago. So, but again, we're grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land. Today's special lecture brings together two themes that transcends borders: the preservation of Indigenous knowledge and the pursuit of justice. These are issues that resonate deeply here in Canada and increasingly across the world, and we're honored to explore how they're being addressed in Taiwan through the work of our distinguished guest speaker. We're delighted to have with us today Professor Daya Kuan, Chair of the Department of Ethnology at National Chengchi University and the Executive Director of the Taiwan-Philippines Science and Technology Innovation Center for Indigenous Knowledge, Local Knowledge, and Sustainability Studies. We're also very grateful to Professor Victor Falkenheim, who's a Professor Emeritus and Director of the Global Taiwan Studies Initiative and a longtime contributor to this library for moderating today's conversation. This is a special opportunity to reflect on the journey of the Taiwan Resource Centre here in the East Asian Library. It was established in 2015 as the first center of its kind in Canada and has expanded our East Asian Library collections, particularly in digital and Taiwan studies resources, and it helps position this library as a hub of cultural exchange and academic inquiry. Last August actually, I had the great pleasure of visiting Taiwan. I think it was the third time I'd been there, but the enormous pleasure of visiting the National Central Library, where I received a warm and generous welcome from the Director General, Han Jing Wang, and her colleagues. It was really an incredibly valuable event for me. I learned so much from our colleagues in the National Central Library and the work that they're doing. I was deeply impressed by the richness of the library collections, the vision and dedication of its leadership, and its strong commitment to fostering international academic exchange. Some years before that, I had signed an agreement, a partnership agreement with the National Central Library, and we continue at the University of Toronto Libraries to deeply value that partnership, of which that visit was just a part. Unfortunately, Director General Wang was to be here today. She and I had exchanged a number of emails about a visit, but unfortunately, due to a major scheduling conflict in Taipei, she and her colleagues were unable to attend the event as originally planned. However, we are pleased to welcome Yiping Liang, Director General of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Toronto, who is here with us today on behalf of the National Central Library, who just came to Toronto in the dead of our winter. I promise you it will get better. It will actually get really warm, maybe. And he is joined by Director Ethan Lau, also from the office. We're grateful for their presence and the continued support of the Taiwan Resource Centre partnership. So thank you both for being here very, very much. As one of the world's leading academic library systems, we are proud that the Taiwan Resource Centre at the U of T contributes to a global network of collaboration in Chinese and Taiwan studies. Taiwan is home, as I've experienced several times, to a vibrant academic community and a rich cultural heritage. And this partnership helps us to ensure that our students and our researchers and our faculty have access to both emerging and traditional perspectives from the region. So again, thank you all for being here, but thank you more for the partnership which enables so much research and learning here at the University of Toronto. The wealth of resources does, as I say, support the teaching, learning, and research needs of scholars at the U of T and across Canada. Advancing knowledge in fields from history, linguistics to anthropology and public policy. But beyond the books and digital resources, centers like the Taiwan Resource Centre and events like today's serve a much, much broader purpose. They bring together scholars, communities, and cultures in ways that deepen understanding, foster dialogue, spark new conversations that cross disciplines, borders, and generations. As I said at the beginning, that is so important, but it is so much more important in the environment in which we live in the world today. So with that, I'm going to stop. There's lots of really interesting speakers. And first, I'd like to invite my colleague, Hannah Kim, who's director of the Tung East Asian Library, to the podium. She has been instrumental in both leading this library and the amazing things that are done here, but also in leading this partnership and today's celebration. So please welcome Hannah Kim.
Thank you so much, Larry, for your wonderful remarks. I'm Hannah Kim. I'm the director of the Tung East Asian Library here at the University of Toronto. I will be your MC this afternoon. It's a real pleasure to welcome you all to this very special event celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Taiwan Resource Centre for Chinese Studies, TRCCS in short, at the University of Toronto Libraries, as well as this year's TRCCS lecture. This event is made possible through the generous support of the National Central Library of Taiwan and the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Toronto. A big thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and to all of you for joining us today. As we celebrate 10 years of the TRCCS program, it's worth noting that our collaboration with Taiwan stretches even further back. For decades, the U of T Libraries has been fortunate to receive exchange materials and scholarly publications from Taiwan. In 2014, we took an exciting step forward by partnering with the National Central Library to digitize part of our Chinese rare books. The project included over 220 titles and 2,100 volumes dating back to the Ming and Cheng dynasties. And now these are all freely available, open access. Thanks to the TRCCS program, we continue to receive a rich range of publications and resources related to Taiwan and Chinese studies, benefiting our faculty, students, and wider community. We have also had the pleasure of hosting TRCCS lecture in 2017 and during the pandemic time 2021 in virtual format. The Taiwan Resource Centre for Chinese Studies is located at the back of our library, so I encourage you all to visit the center during the reception. We also have set up a small display featuring selected books we have received through the TRCCS program. So please feel free to check them out during the event. We are deeply grateful for this partnership with the National Central Library, which continues to support sinological scholarship and foster academic exchange between Taiwan and Canada. This event has come together thanks to the efforts of so many, our colleagues at the National Central Library, the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Toronto, the University of Toronto Libraries, and of course the East Asian Library team. We sincerely thank you all for your support and partnership. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Han-Ching Wang, Director General of the National Central Library. As Larry has mentioned, she was not able to be here today due to unavoidable scheduling conflict. However, she has graciously shared a pre-recorded message to us. So let's now hear from the Director General Wang.
Honored Mr. Larry Elford, Chief Librarian, University of Toronto Library, Mr. Hannah King, Director of the Zheng Tung East Asian Library at the University of Toronto, Mr. Liang Yipeng, Director General of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Toronto, and the Professor Guan Da-Wei, Distinguished Speaker, National Chengchi University. It's truly a great pleasure to join you online today and to celebrate together a very meaningful milestone, the 10th anniversary of the Taiwan Resource Centre for Chinese Study, in short, TRCCS, at the University of Toronto Libraries. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the University of Toronto Libraries and the Zheng Tung East Asian Library for your outstanding dedications in managing and growing the TRCCS over the past 10 years. A special thank you to Chief Librarian Elford and Director King. Your leadership, vision, and continued support have been key to making the TRCCS what it is today. I also would like to take the moment to acknowledge Director General Liang Yipeng of the TECO in Toronto. Director Liang, your great support for academic exchange has been truly invaluable. Thank you. As Chinese studies and Taiwan studies continue to grow in international importance, and as we work to share Taiwan's unique cultural perspectives with the world, the National Central Library launched the TRCCS program back in 2012. Since then, we have built a strong network with 50 partner international institutions worldwide. And in 2023, we expand this effort by launching the Taiwan Academic Digital Resources Center, in short, TADRC, which now link 3 international partner institutions through the online cooperated platform. Through both the TRCCS and the TADRC, we aim to share Taiwan's outstanding academic publications and build strong cooperations with leading Chinese and Taiwan studies centers worldwide. The TRCCS, in particular, has played an important role in making Taiwan's rich academic resources available to scholars around the world. The University of Toronto Libraries TRCCS, officially established at the Zheng Tung East Asian Library on September 23, 2015, was actually a very first center of this kind in Canada. This center was established on a strong partnership between the National Central Library and the University of Toronto Library. Over the years, these cooperations has brought many achievements. Between 2013 and 2024, the National Central Library donated the 2,400 volumes to the TRCCS collection, not even counting the additional 414 volumes contributed after the 2017 Association for Asian Studies Manual Meeting and Book Fair. We have also supported academic exchange. More than 9 University of Toronto scholars have received the National Central Library support for research visits to Taiwan. In the area of the document preservation, we worked together in 2014 to digitize rare books. This project produced digital images of the 222 rare titles. A total of 294,000 high-quality images now are all freely available to researchers worldwide. And in terms of the academic activity, we have organized 2 Taiwan lectures on Chinese studies in 2017 and 2021. Topic includes the Taiwanese cinema and transformative justice for Taiwan's indigenous people. Such a lecture clearly demonstrates the Taiwan's academic achievement and play an important role in promoting international scholar exchange. In each of these cooperation, Director Cheng and her colleagues have provided invaluable support from helping to shape the topic to inviting speakers. These efforts has brought the Taiwan and Canada closer through the communication. The University of Toronto Library, as the biggest, largest academic library system in Canada, has a long and distinguished tradition of supporting scholarship and research. Even before the TRCCS was established, University of Toronto Library's Chinese collection was already the key resources for scholars across North America. With the creation of the TRCCS, we aim to highlight diverse perspectives and innovations that Taiwan brought to the Chinese studies, while also support the Taiwan studies by offering a rich collection of physical books and digital resources. In conclusion, I would like to extend my warmest congratulations to the University of Toronto Library on the 10th anniversary of TRCCS. Today's celebration will highlight a special lecture by Professor Kuan Da-Wei, which will discuss how Taiwan is achieving transformative justice by combining indigenous knowledge with the modern science. We are also deeply appreciative of the Professor Victor Falkenheim for moderating this important lecture. Finally, I regret that, due to certain reasons, I am unable to join you in person today. However, we will continue to maintain close communication with University of Toronto Libraries. I am confident that with the University of Toronto's strong and careful management, the TRCCS will continue to provide invaluable support to scholars and help share Taiwan's academic contributions with a global communication. We hope that as the TRCCS reflect the Taiwan's commitment to academic freedom, equality, and humanism, there will be even more opportunities for cooperation in future. I wish the 10th anniversary celebration great success, and I am looking forward to visiting the University of Toronto Libraries in person soon. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General Wang, if she can hear us. All right, now it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Victor Falkenheim, Professor Emeritus and Director of the Global Taiwan Studies Initiative at the Asian Institute, Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto, to share a few remarks and introduce this year's TRCCS lecturer and speaker. Dr. Falkenheim will also be moderating the lecture and the Q&A session that follows. A brief introduction, Dr. Falkenheim is Professor Emeritus of Political Science and East Asian Studies at the University of Toronto, where he began teaching in 1972. He currently leads the Global Taiwan Studies Initiative at the Monk School. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Falkenheim.
Thank you, Director Kim. Welcome, everyone. It's a great personal pleasure to to be involved to help celebrate this important partnership. In my current capacity, and I've served in this capacity since the fall as director of the Global Taiwan Studies Initiative, we are among the principal beneficiaries of this exchange. We have a thriving program at the Monk School teaching a variety of graduate students from multiple departments, a course entitled Global Taiwan, and they use this collection, and it's important to their ongoing studies. But it's a personal honor and pleasure because before I came to the University of Toronto in 1972, I was a Fulbright Fellow in Taiwan, 1967, 1968. In 1969, I was hosted by the the Institute of International Relations, which subsequently migrated to Professor Guan's institution at Chengda. And the hospitality that was shown to me, the support for my academic research, I cannot repay. It was vital to my understanding of China, of Taiwan, and in fact, Taiwan is my favorite place. I go back frequently. So today, this is a particular pleasure to welcome you all here to, I think, a wonderful lecture. I've had the privilege of looking at the slides first because you sent it to us, and I'm really looking forward to Professor Guan's presentation, as all of you are. So congratulations. To the East Asian Library, to the University of Toronto Library. Great thanks to the National Central Library, for their support for our academic and research work over these very many years. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. All right, so we can.
It's okay. Okay, it's okay. That's okay. 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 All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Kuan Da-Wei, Da-Wei Kuan, who's chair of the Department of Ethnology at National Chengchi University. He's executive director of the Taiwan-Philippines Science and Technology Innovation Center for Indigenous Knowledge. He's a member of the Taiwan Indigenous group in Taiwan. He earned his PhD in geography from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and his research focuses on indigenous geography, land policy, community mapping. He is an activist as well as a scholar, a distinguished researcher, and an important sort of figure in indigenous studies in Taiwan and globally. So it's a particular pleasure and an honor to welcome him here to the podium, and we look forward to his remarks. And there'll be Q&A afterwards. I'm happy to chair that with him. So thank you.
afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here and share the research of Taiwan indigenous people at the center dedicated to Chinese study. While this may appear to be a cross-boundary encounters, it is in fact a valuable opportunity for dialogue. Chinese study concerns the continuity of historical and cultural tradition, whereas indigenous study reveal the diverse memory and knowledge system rooted in the land of Taiwan. This is not merely a marginal supplement, but a chance to rethink our narrative of history and place, one that invites mutual inspiration and a deeper understanding of Taiwan. So this is a little background of myself, and thank you for your introduction. The outline of my talk today. Although Taiwan is relatively a small island, it hosts remarkable diverse ecological system. Geographically, it connects the Asian continent and on one side, while opening out to the Pacific Ocean on the other. It is also the cradle of the Austronesian language family, one of the most widely dispersed language family in the world today. Beyond linguistic discussion, ethnobotanical studies have shown that the paper mulberry tree, commonly used for making bark clothes throughout the Pacific, can genetically be traced back to Taiwan. Archaeological evidence also indicate that over 3,000 years ago, Taiwan was an important center for jade production and trade in broader Southeast Asia region. However, beginning in the 17th century, Taiwan experienced successive wave of colonial rule, which colonizers arriving from both East Asia and Europe. Toward the end of Dutch colonial period, a new phase of settler-colonialism began. In order to increase rice production, the Dutch introduced Han settlers from the Chinese coast and granted them land to cultivate. Some scholars have described this as co-colonization. During the rule of Zheng Gong, Guo Xinya, Taiwan was viewed as a base for retaking China, which led to the expansion of agricultural development and the massacre of lowland Austronesian-speaking village. Under Qing rule, indigenous people were categorized as either raw or cooked, uncivilized versus assimilated. And a three-tier buffer zone was implemented, relocating the Cook indigenous people to the foothill area to serve as a buffer between the Han settler and the raw mountain indigenous community. The Qing dynasty was largely unable to govern Taiwan's mountainous region effectively. It was not until the Japanese colonial period that the state carried out military pacification, bringing the mountain under its control, nationalizing most forest land and reserving only small portion of it as indigenous reserve for living and farming. After World War II, the Republic of China government took over this nationalized forest and continued state-led exploitation. It maintained the reserve system and starting in 1970s, gradually privatized the lands by granting individual ownership. Many studies on settler colonialism emphasize that it requires vast tract of land settlers carry their sovereignty and lifestyle with them, reshaping land in their own image. Some scholars argue that the ultimate goals of settler colonialism is the elimination of indigenous peoples. As an indigenous scholar, my central concern is how to achieve the alternative to this settler colonial endgame of indigenous elimination. As a geographer, all of my research can be understood through the framework shown on the slide. On one hand, I strive to engage deeply with indigenous land culture and ecological knowledge. On the other hand, I seek to bring that knowledge into dialogue with the state's policies on land and natural resources, with the hope of integrating indigenous perspective into the system and transforming the system itself from within. These slides show the spatial transformation of indigenous territory across different historical periods. We can see the consistent shrinking of indigenous living space from Cheng to the Japanese period. The indigenous reserve established during the Japanese rule are represented by the scattered patch on the right-hand side of the image. If we overlay maps from different historical periods, we can identify several distinct areas. The orange area represents regions where lowland indigenous groups were relocated after being displaced from the coastal plain. The purple area, eastern Taiwan, were designated as general regular administrative region during Japanese rules, yet they were heavily populated by indigenous people. In the Qing period, most of the land in the orange area has already been seized. In the purple area, privatization began during the Japanese period, leading to massive land loss. The green area represents present day's highland indigenous region, which were categorized as spatial administrative zone during the Japanese era. Today, most of the forest resources in this region remain nationalized and are controlled by the state. The reserve, due to the privatization, now face the same risk of disposition as the orange and purple zone. Perhaps a real story from my hometown can illustrate how, even after Japanese colonialism ended, the structural conditions have remained. In the 1950s, with limited road access to in the mountain, many of my people relied on gathering wild mushroom for trade in the lowland. Later, lowland settlers introduced log-based mushroom cultivation, and many indigenous people began cultivating mushroom on what government considered state-owned land. From our perspective, we were simply returning to our ancestral land, but from the government's perspective, we were trespassing on national property and stealing state forest resources. The Forestry Bureau deployed rangers to destroy our mushroom huts and arrest growers. In my hometown, a young man who had served in the Navy Special Force heard about this violent raid. He confronted one of the rangers, and during the argument, he killed him. He fled into the mountains, and the government mobilized a large military and police force to capture him. After 40 days in hiding, he was lured out and shot to death. One of my students, Savik, later wrote a master thesis collecting the history of the event. The young man's father was also arrested and later committed suicide in prison. His son just 2 or 3 years old at that time, was raised by his mother and her new husband. My student, Savi, interviewed this now middle-aged man who said, "I don't know why they killed my father, and I don't know why my father killed someone. All I know is that ever since then, I have carried the shame of being the son of a murderer." In my view, both the forest ranger who was killed and the young man who committed the killing were victims of a structural tragedy. A tragedy rooted in the spatial oppression of indigenous life caused by colonialism. Taiwan underwent a process of democratization in the 1980s, which was accompanied by a wave of indigenous movement. In the year 2000, then President Chen Shui-bian signed a document with indigenous represented called the New Partnership, which acknowledged indigenous rights to our traditional territory. Although I don't have time today to elaborate on the effort and challenge surrounding the traditional territory claim, it is worth briefly noting that in 2017, due to the concern from the settler descendants, indigenous territorial claim suffered a significant setback. This is one of the reasons we must now engage in social dialogue, both intellectually and ideologically. Academic research on indigenous knowledge in Taiwan began during the Japanese colonial period with anthropological study carried out in colonial framework. At that time, indigenous people were object of study. However, after 2000, a substantial part of indigenous knowledge research emerged as a response to land and natural resources conflict between indigenous community and the government. In addition, indigenous scholars, including myself, began participating actively in the field of study. Following the 2000 New Partnership Agreement, the government launched a large-scale investigation of indigenous traditional territory. This series of investigations began in 2002 and concluded in 2012. The slide shows the location where my student and I have collaborated with indigenous communities over the past few years to conduct traditional territorial mapping. This area ranged from the snow-covered high mountain in the winter to the coastal region in the east where it's summer all year round. This experience has further convinced me that the Taiwan's indigenous people have developed diverse and vital survival strategy adapted to the wide range ecological environment. Let me share an example from research I conduct on community Daya peoples. Our ancestors migrate northward from the central mountain region of Taiwan, following the mountain ridge and across river system. Along the way, they established a network of settlement. And this is an example of the participatory mapping we carry out in the community. Through field survey, oral history interview, and analysis of traditional chanting, we document numerous place names, term of landforms, and associated stories. We found that many Dayan place names are metaphorical projection of the human body. We also discovered that the Dayan social system is deeply intertwined with watershed-based ecological system. Therefore, I interpret the Dayan landscape management as having its own temporal and spatial logic, This challenged the colonial misconception that indigenous Sweden agriculture was ignorant, uncivilized, and destructive to the forest environment. My research also shows that indigenous ecological knowledge is not frozen in the past, nor is it an outdated historical relic. In this example, although the community no longer cultivate millet and has shifted to growing cash crop like cabbage, they still apply many soil and water conservation practice originally developed from millet growing, practice that has been scientifically validated through spatial analysis for their effectiveness. According to the government regulation, their farming violates the law because it's on steep slope. However, if you compare the government's logic for determining whether the land is suitable for agricultural with the community on logic, you will find that the latter is more dedicated and context sensitive. Therefore, one of the key recommendations after the research I made was the government assessment of land use sustainability should involve the participation of local indigenous community and their knowledge system. In 2016, Taiwan's legislature passed a new Spatial Planning Act. The law explicitly recognized the importance of respecting indigenous land knowledge and wisdom. Just 1 year before the law was enacted, an experimental land use planning project was conducted in a Daya community. As a consultant to the project, I had the opportunity to share my research finding and idea with the planning team with, who working alongside the community. On this slide, the left side shows the government's previous zoning and land use regulation, while the right side displays the outcome of nearly 4 years of collaborative planning between the community and the project team. The community developed plan include a number of carefully defined land use zones. When you compare the government older zoning scheme with the community developed land use plan, it becomes clear that the latter incorporates rich layers of local knowledge that government planning alone simply cannot match. Because of National Spatial Planning Act, indigenous community in Taiwan have begun to gain opportunity to incorporate our own land use knowledge and needs into spatial planning process. In response, my research partner, students, and I have initiated workshops in various indigenous communities. My research, the slide shows an example where my research partner and I asked community member, if the government want to learn something from you, what will you most want to teach the government? In this workshop, community members began sharing us about their traditional system of land classification and the associated cultural regulations. In 2020, amendment to the Indigenous Education Act required the government to support the development of indigenous knowledge system. As a result, the Council of Indigenous People launched relevant initiatives. Meanwhile, at the National Science and Technology Council, promoted by indigenous legislator, a national strategy was proposed to promote indigenous science and technology. Since 2022, I have been leading a research project commissioned by the NSTC to implement this strategy. My goal has been to build a platform for dialogue and collaboration among government agency, academic researchers, and indigenous communities. Our project team includes ecologists, geologists, ethnologists, geographer, botanist, social economists, and legal scholars, some of whom are indigenous, while others are descendants of settlers. We aim to foster dialogue between indigenous knowledge and modern science, with indigenous perspective at the core. Our objective is to identify concrete strategy to address development issues facing indigenous society, such as slope land utilization, co-management of natural resources, agricultural economy, and urban-rural mobility. Because this project requires coordination across government agency, academic institution, and indigenous communities, we have had to organize numerous meetings. From this decision, we came to understand that each sector operates with its own priority and logic. We also regularly organize walk-in workshops, allowing members of our academic team to experience firsthand how some form of indigenous knowledge can only be understood by placing oneself in the local context, even physically engaged with the landscape. The workshop, held across different indigenous communities, were designed to place indigenous participants in the role of teachers, guiding and explaining their knowledge to scholars. One example of our research involved collaboration between our teams, botanists and biologists, and trained members of Amis communities. Using scientific method, the community members began fieldwork that gradually incorporate Amis language and traditional botanical knowledge. The result was a bilingual, community-based ecological database, an essential foundation for future co-management of resources. In another case, our geologists worked with the community members to explore the site of an old settlement and discover that its stone slate house on a slope featured sophisticated drainage systems and the structure that slow retrogressive erosion. When we use spatial science to compare this riverbed slope formerly occupied by the community with a nearby uninhabited slope, we found significantly less erosion on the former. In other words, the Taiwan people who once lived there had already developed effective knowledge for hillside management long ago. Therefore, our goal is to integrate the National Spatial Planning Act passed in 2016 to establish small-scale, diversified management regime. In the past, all mountain areas in Taiwan were governed under a single set of land use regulation. In the future, we hope to develop place-based regulation that incorporate indigenous land cultures and ecological knowledge. Throughout the process, I have gained many insights. First, we observe the contextual nature of indigenous knowledge. in the case of the local ecological database we are building, modern scientific classification is based on morphology, whereas indigenous naming is often determined by usage. As a result, frequently used plain are sometimes classified more finely than the scientific one. On the other hand, several less used plain may all be referred to by the same name. We also saw that indigenous community members are very interested in external knowledge and hope to learn from the botanist and zoologist to incorporate this knowledge into their own practice. For example, when guiding ecological tour for the outsiders, they also use modern scientific plain names. However, we found that not all indigenous knowledge can be explained by modern science. For instance, divination through dream to predict whether the trap will catch prey, or conducting rituals to calm the spirit of the land down for prevent landslide. Although these ways of knowing may not be mutually explicable, they underscore the importance of cooperation. Cooperation requires dialogue. From our experience facilitating dialogue, we found that dialogue is not merely two parties talking to each other. For both sides to truly enter each other's knowledge system and communicate effectively, there must be a media and process of mediation. Take the example of the local ecological database. The database itself serves as a medium, while the human action involved in building the database, encouraging participation, and translating between perspectives constitute the process of mediation. Another example is the regulation around slope land use. This regulation can serve as a medium through which indigenous people express their view on national land use policy. The process of conducting field visit and interview to document local management knowledge is in itself a process of mediation. Ultimately, we believe that incorporating indigenous knowledge into contemporary land governance regime has meaning both at the scale of indigenous communities and along the urban-rural continuum. Most importantly, from the broader perspective of Taiwan, it represents the construction of a new governance paradigm, one that rebalances the power relations, the power dynamic between the state and indigenous people in policy making and decision making process. Such a shift in power relations cannot be achieved merely by enacting laws. It must be accompanied by an intellectual challenge to the authoritative mainstream knowledge and the colonial narrative of the past. For example, the notion that indigenous Sweden agriculture destroyed the forest, or that indigenous people are incapable of managing our own land. Only when such intellectual authority is challenged can true decolonization take place. We also face challenges. Institutionalizing indigenous knowledge research can be a double-edged sword. While government support bring resources, it also introduces bureaucratic constraints. For example, the Council of Indigenous People often focus on documenting knowledge but may not prioritize applying to the land governance, as many responsibility lie with other agencies. Scholars familiar with both indigenous knowledge and government system must often act as mediators. In addition, organizing dialogue take time and rarely lead to immediate academic publication, which can disadvantage junior scholars. Even when research suggests policy change, actual implementation often depends on timing and broader political will. Decolonization has never been easy, but it's necessary. We must reimagine an endgame for settler colonialism. In this endgame, the descendants of settlers no longer seek only to transform the land in their own image. They must also learn from indigenous knowledge of the land, apply it wisely, and build a homeland where both settler descendants and indigenous peoples can coexist. Indigenous knowledge and the people who practice the knowledge must become part of the foundation for governing the homeland. In this vision, legitimacy of sovereignty in this place comes not from colonial origin, but from shared creation with indigenous participation. Achieving this requires mutual inspiration and deeper understanding from all sides. That is why I'm here today to share our experience and deliver this message. Thank you very much, and this is conclusion of my speech. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That was a wonderful talk. Thank you. And so I'm happy to recognize questions. The audience have.
Is that a quick question? Thank you very much, Wilson. Quick question is that, it's okay, I think. Thank you. So quick question is that there are many different tribes of indigenous people in Taiwan. Do you see any differences in terms of their land use, their land traditional policies and so on? Now, how does it, when the government tries to work with these tribes, do you see any kind of differences in terms of their traditional use?
Yes, of course, yeah. As I just mentioned that there are very diverse ecological systems in Taiwan, and the indigenous land culture are developed through the adaptation to the environment. So there are different ways and different strategies for land use. Yeah. So, for example, for people who live on the high mountain area, the size of the community is relatively small and scattered on the mountain hills. And on the lowland, you can see the large size of the community. That shows different way of housing. And the adaptation to the environment, and also because of for example, even simply in the Daya people, we widespread in the northern part of the mountain area of Taiwan, and some located on higher mountain, some located in the lower a relative lower mountain, and they developed very different knowledge that according to their living space. For example, the community, the Dayan community, live in higher mountain. They developed the strategy to store the food during the winter because it's freezing cold in place like Jinsivu. Dr. Smiker has been there, and for people who live in the aside the river, they developed further skill for fishing and managing the rivers. So even in Dayan community, in Dayan group, different community have their own knowledge according to their in their ecological system, and for different group also have different strategy and different knowledge for land use. Yes. Yes, please.
I'm wondering about areas, various indigenous groups' territory across Taiwan where the state or developers are engaging in resource projects. Is there any consultation with communities? Are there any environmental monitoring or archaeological monitoring on behalf of the indigenous community? Is there any benefit sharing agreements as part of these developments? Is there any long-term engagement or anything of that nature?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. In 2005 in Taiwan, the Congress passed a law called Indigenous Basic Law. And according to the Indigenous Basic Law, any development or scientific research or constraint put on it, over indigenous land need to consult indigenous people. So we have some case that already happened. For example, the developers for green energy, the solar power in the indigenous community, they had to consult communities. But we also see that the design of the regulation is not, there are still space for progress, for whole the process. There are some detailed situation, for example, who can really vote for making the decision? Can those who move out living in the urban area still vote, or their family in the village can vote for them? So because there is a law, a regulation written in the law, but when it comes to the implementation, we found there's still a lot of things need to be done. So I would say, and also we found that it's also possible that the developer will manipulate the process of FPIC. And that will also cause some local conflict in the community. So yes, in the law, there is a regulation for prior consultants with the community. But in practice, we see that the process is not perfect, and we need more insight from the community to rectify the process. Yes. Yes, please.
I very much appreciate your account of this process that you have been a part of, and that shows the dynamism of indigenous politics in Taiwan. Things are changing from year to year, from decade to decade, whereas in Canada we just seem to keep going around in the same circles. But in a way, your depiction is an ideal situation if people are willing to consult, if politicians are willing to listen. But of course, politics, local interests, political parties, factions, all get in the way of a final result. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the problems of realizing this process in the realities of local level politics in Taiwan.
Yes, yes, I think that's important. What I show you is relatively a successful case we are working on, but of course there are also some obstacle or some trouble we are encountering. The local political dynamic you mentioned is one of them. So even though the central government is relatively easier to have a high standard goal for the policy, when we come to the local level, you will encounter the local interest conflicts. Taking Chengchi as an example, the township governor is very often highly involved in the local construction, the interest, the economic interest through the infrastructure construction. That's a huge budget from the local perspective. So the township governors very often kind of have some under-table trade with the local developers, and that caused the negative outcome of the project. And also, even though the central government do have the resources wanting to be transport to the local level, but in the local level, for example, the township governor will has her or his own person he want to take care of. So not everyone in the community or not every organization in the community can share the resources equally, and in that way, for many of the community member or the local organization will contest each other for the resources, and that is also a negative side of the local economic and politics. Yes. Yeah.
It seems to me that the Taiwanese government is quite recognizing and appreciative of the indigenous peoples or the roots of the country. And I'm wondering, with your research and the continued dialogue with the government to promote your research, if the knowledge that you've gained, if it has been passed down to the education system so that children can learn more about the indigenous people and the roots of Taiwan?
Yes, yes. Because of the amendment of the Indigenous Education Act, I mentioned the amendment in 2020. So the government start to invest in the building of the Center for Indigenous Knowledge Studies in many different universities. In my university, we have the Center for Daya Indigenous Knowledge Studies. And the center is working with the school teachers to generate the teacher materials and to establish the database for the school teachers to can gain the resources for making their teacher material. So yes, we are doing that. But we are also we also notice that very often people tend to objectify indigenous knowledge, seeing it like something you collect from the field and you put that into the database. But the really way to function indigenous knowledge is to be practiced in the place. So the establishment of the knowledge system is not just a content of the knowledge, but the respect to the knowledge holders and the space for the knowledge holder to practice their knowledge. So to make this knowledge be implemented in the policy for land use and many other fields, it is something we really concern. So we also established a program in my university to foster the graduate students. That is a master program for indigenous land policy and environmental planning. Because if you want to implement the policy, you need to have the people to do it. So one thing we are doing now is to foster the programs is we recruit indigenous young men to study in the master program. So after graduation, they can be either the planner in the community or serve in the government. And we also see that there is a difficulty for generating the teacher material because, for example, for one lesson in the textbook, that might take many years of work, right? And after many years of work, you can only generate one lesson. So it requires a lot of work, more than what we have done so far. So yes, we are trying to pass it down to the next generation, but I think we still need to make a lot more effort.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, please.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned a little bit about some conflicts between development versus planning zoning. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, how this will play into potential impacts on ownership, land ownership. I don't know if that makes sense. Now, you mentioned about the concentration on the planning, zoning side of things,
Yes.
and that how that might impact the developers, for example, right? But in the longer run, how in the longer term, how would would that impact the land ownership?
Yes. Yes. As I just mentioned, that most of the living space or traditional territory were nationalized, so it's a public land owned by the government, and few of the land were designated as the so-called reserve land, and that is privatized for indigenous peoples. So you will see a dichotomy of land ownership. It's either owned by the government, by the state, or owned by the individual persons. But we see a lot of conflict come after this kind of dichotomy. For example, in many indigenous communities, the land are collectively owned or managed or decided by either the village or some family or some minor group. So you see that in the indigenous knowledge system, the ownership is more dedicated, not just state-owned property or individual property. So yes, this kind of property system also influence the development of indigenous land. For example, the developers who want to develop their industry, they tend to work or collaborate with individual persons who own the land. For example, there is a case in Taiwan. The developers tend to establish some industry by gaining the land from individual indigenous person. According to the law, because it's private property, you only have to get agreement from the landlord. But there are actually some effect that will influence the whole community. So in this way, we also see that we need to have more collective management over the development in the indigenous community. So it has been discussed, can the community have the, as a legal unit to own the property, or even other social organization in the community, such as a family or a lineage system, can be the unit legally possess the land property. In that way, that will more in accordance with the land cultures and more diverse and collective way of managing the land can be realized.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. As a Shilaya descendant, Pimpu, and I'm deeply interested in the ongoing official recognition Musu Hapa movement. And could you share your insight on this current status and challenge of the Shilaya Zhenming process? Specifically, how the integrating the indigenous land knowledge, as you have described, support our political land and legal recognitions as a distinct people. Thank you.
For Shilaya people?
Yeah, Shilaya.
Yeah. I think there is no doubt that, of course, the Shilaya people, they are the Austronesian language speaking people. They were in Taiwan before the coming of modern state. They are indigenous people here. They are not recognized just because of the colonial category that make them plain Pimpu people, and because of the division of the administrative zoning and the household registration system that lead to the situation that, and also the reallocation policy during the Qing dynasty that lead to the situation that the government does not recognize the official status of Shilaya people. But I do believe and I do support that Shilaya people deserve the recognition from the government and also from the international society as indigenous peoples in Taiwan. Yeah.
I guess my question kind of expands on the previous one. You mentioned this distinction. Thank you. You mentioned this distinction during colonial times between raw and cooked indigenous peoples. Yeah. You mentioned the word decoloniality. So as a literature scholar, I immediately start thinking about a cultural production, language preservation, and I'm just kind of curious to know how these policies kind of translate into the realm of I guess, language preservation and cultural preservation more specifically, because I'm reminded of this article called Taiwan's Gift to the World, and it was specifically the the Austronesian language family, for which several branches originated and are housed on the island of Taiwan, and then the last one being the one that turned into, the Malayo-Polynesian language family in the Malay Archipelago, Easter Island, Madagascar. But then that said, there's so much diversity that exists at the level of language, which is reflected in the diversity of indigenous cultures that exist under this umbrella of Taiwanese indigeneity. So I guess I'm curious to know, how does this translate into those, into those realms, given that the land itself and the people that inhabit them are so diverse, as are the languages and cultures that they possess. So how does that manifest in this aspect, I guess?
Yes, I think the conservation of indigenous culture and language might be one of the most important goal for the government, including the Council of Indigenous People, because the Indigenous Education Act required the government to spend 2% of the budget over the indigenous education and cultural conservation. So taking myself as an example, when I was in elementary school, in the textbook, it was told that indigenous people were barbarian, and our ancestor killed Wu Feng, who was a very kind person, tried to educate indigenous people not to do the head hunting, but the indigenous people were so uncivilized. They killed their beloved Wu Feng eventually, and they were so regret, so they decide to stop head hunting. That's a story, a fiction, but it was put into the textbook, and I was taught. When I was an elementary school student, I was the only indigenous student because I was sent to the urban area to a Catholic school. So I was the only one indigenous student in that classroom. And when the teachers read the book, the story to us, I feel ashamed. And after I went home, I cried to my mother. My mother said, "Why are you crying?" I say, "Because our ancestors were so barbarian." But my son, to compare with my son, when he was in elementary school, which was about 10 years ago, even though he was the only one indigenous student in the elementary school, because he studied in the elementary school nearby my university, so he was the only one in the school. The school was required to hire indigenous language teachers to teach the indigenous language for him individually every week. So that shows a progress, example of the progress. And of course, there are a lot of policy to do this kind of language preservation and also the promotion of culture. And of course, there are always positive and negative sides. I would like to further share the story of my son. When he was in the elementary school, one day I got a noticement from the school teachers that she gave a form for application for indigenous language speech contest, but he didn't get the reply from the parent. The parent have to sign on it, but my son just hide it. He didn't show that to us, and but we got the noticement from the teachers. So before the deadline for submitting the application, I asked my son, "Why didn't you give the application form to us? Do you feel ashamed speaking indigenous language?" Actually, he was taught to speak indigenous language, and he know how to speak in many contexts. But he just didn't want to give the form to me. And after a long discussion, he cried. He said, "I don't want to go to the language contest because I want to go to the ping pong table tennis summer camp." So it recalled me, my crying in the school when I was in the Emeritus, was a kid. Of course, it's different, right? I experienced the negative discrimination, so I feel ashamed in the school. Now my son, because of the cultural diversity, the multiculturalism policy, so he has the confirm of the importance of language, but he didn't want to go because he wanted to go to the ping pong, table tennis summer camp. Then I realized, oh yes, you will always have the positive and negative sides when you implement a policy to encourage the conservation of indigenous culture and language through the policy. Sometimes you will also constrain the choice of the kids, like my son. So eventually I say to him, okay, it's your option. You can either go or not to go. So this is example of the multiculturalism policy in Taiwan nowadays. Yes, we have top-down implementation with the good willing. Of the good willing is not come from nothing. It's come from the long-term struggle of indigenous movement and a negotiation after a lot of conflict. It comes from the good policy and resources redistribution, but it also have to be very aware of this kind of side effect happen. So we always need to adjust, always need to rethink what's going on now and how can we do better. Yeah. Yes, please.
So on a personal level, would you say that your interest in studying and teaching about indigenous peoples came from your desire as an indigenous person to change people's ideas about indigenous people and change perhaps the I guess very backward way of the old books, the way they were teaching the children. Is this what inspired you to become a professor of indigenous peoples?
Yeah, exactly. I withdrew from the university twice. Firstly, the first time I was in the university, I majored in medical. Then the second time, I majored in civil engineering. But I withdrew over and over because I just, it was 1990s, 80s, late 80s, late 90s. It was the time Taiwan went through the democratization process and a lot of struggle and protest on the street. I was just attracted to the street, and I ran out from the university. But gradually, I learned that the only having the passion is not enough, because everything in Taiwan, in terms of indigenous right, is getting institutionalized. And if you want, and institutionalized, as I say, is a double-edged sword. So a double-edged sword. So you need, if you want to do something to make that better, you have to involve in the dialogue with more dedicated policy and different institutional things. So passion and protest is important, but not enough. So after serving in the military, I decided to return to the university. And I gained my master's degree and went study abroad and found my passion. What I see that, teaching is one of the very mere job that you can keep talking to people. and they don't run away. So I can years after years share my idea with my students. Most of them are non-Indigenous, like Liang Yu and also Lauren. They were my student in the university, now my assistant in my research project. They are not Indigenous. But I and my student, we went through a lot of work. The cooperation between the descendants of settlers and indigenous people, because we believe a coexistence future of different group in Taiwan. So yes, I think teaching is something, make me feel like kind of a way for realizing the idea for our common future. Yes.
Are we at time?
Sure. Yeah. Do you would you like to wrap up or any last few minutes?
No, just on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank Professor Kuan for a wonderful talk, for sharing his personal experience with us, as well as his wisdom from research, his research work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for our speaker, Dr. Kuan, and our moderator, Dr. Victor Falkenheim. Please give them another big applause. And really, the topic itself really deeply resonates with what we are going through here in Canada. So it was just so informative and very insightful. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite Director General Yipeng Liang of the Taipei Economic and Culture Office in Toronto, who is also representing the National Central Library today at this event, to deliver his closing remarks. Director General Liang assumed his new role earlier this year, and we are honored to welcome him to this very important occasion. Please welcome Director General Liang.
This is indeed a very, very outstanding lecture and discussions. I'm so impressed. I'm also so proud of our Professor Kuan, as well as our good friend, Dr. Falkenheim, as well as TRCCS. So I'm so glad to be here. And Chief Librarian, Mr. Alford, and Director Kim, Professor Falkenheim, Professor Kuan, and all of our distinguished guests here today. It is indeed such a joyful occasion today as we gather to celebrate the 10th anniversary of TRCCS at the University of Toronto. This is more than a celebration. It is a powerful testament to a decade friendship, academic collaboration, and cultural exchange. Standing here at this moment, I feel deeply honored and moved. Just now, Professor Kuan, his informative and inspiring lecture on Taiwan's Indigenous affairs and their global significance have given us a new insight into the depth and diversity of Taiwan's cultural landscape. As a matter of fact, Indigenous affairs and multiculturalism are one of the most important common areas that we share with the great country of Canada. Therefore, Professor Guang's words remind us that Chinese studies is not only about classical texts, but about building a living bridge that connects Taiwan's story to the world. 10 years ago, we had the great privilege of inviting the University of Toronto to host one of the earliest TRCCS sites abroad. It was because this university is Canada's most prestigious one, also home to Zheng Yudong East Asian Library. Thereafter, TRCCS took root and has since grown into a dynamic hub connecting scholars from Taiwan, Canada, and across the globe. The National Central Museum and my office would like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to Director Kim. Without her leadership and dedication, TRCCS wouldn't be this vibrant and impactful platform it is today. I also wish to thank Director General Wang in Taipei and her team at the National Central Library in Taiwan for their steadfast support through generous donations, digital resources, and co-sponsored academic programs. Their contributions have brought our long history and culture to life here in Canada and beyond. As the chief of Taiwan's mission here in Toronto, I firmly believe that initiatives like TRCCS are not just academic collaboration, they are a cultural bridge. TRCCS stands as a shining example of Taiwan's commitment to global exchange and cultural dialogue. Looking ahead, I sincerely hope that the partnership between the two will continue to flourish. Let us further expand TRCC's digital reach, engage the next generation of scholars, and explore collaborations with other academic institutions across Canada. In closing, I'd like to once again congratulate to the University of Toronto, to the Asian Library, and to all the dedicated partners who have contributed to the success of TRCCS over the past 10 years. Let us together look forward to the next chapter of even greater achievement of TRCCS. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so lovely speech. Thank you very, very much, Director Liang, Director General Liang. So I know everybody's thirsty and hungry, so food is waiting for us. But just before that, just one more minute, to commemorate this 10th year anniversary, we prepared special commemorative cookies. So with that, we will have a group photo with the speakers and the officials from the TECO office. And they will take very short, and then we will move on to reception. And you're all invited. Please hang around. And then also take a look at the display we have prepared. But also don't forget to visit our center, TRCCS Center. The main focus of today, it's at the back of the library. Our staff will be able to guide you where it is. So thank you for coming. Thank you.